All right, I'm here today with Tony and Jess. They're going to talk to us about their ADU process, which involves the ever quirky historical preservation overlay zone. And I love it because they ended up going and talking to a lot of different people. I think they talked to 5 different GCs by the end of their search. And that's kind of what I often recommend when people are asking me about the sponsor realm. I'm like, look, they get you a couple, 2, 3 GCs to interview. They'll help you compare stuff. But also go and interview your own. You can only win by talking to more builders and getting more quotes and getting more educated early in that process before you go in. All right, I talked enough. Tony and Jess, thank you very much. And do you mind introducing yourselves?
I'm Jessica, and I guess we've been at this house since 2012.
I'm the husband. I'm Tony, and also here since 2012.
Congratulations.
Well, we got the house, and our family has expanded during this time, so.
Yeah, 2 kids in a decade.
And 2 dogs.
And 2 dogs.
Yep. But yeah, so we had just a garage back there before that we were using for storage.
Or hoarding. Yeah. Depending on how you look at it.
Those are very similar sometimes. There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, it's perspective.
So, when did you first start thinking about an accessory dwelling unit?
Well, so what's funny about it is the house is almost, it's over 100 years old now. And some point, we think in the 40s, the woman who owned the house tried to do it unpermitted and got caught. So there was sort of this really odd garage, half-finished dwelling anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like clearly like a bath, like she'd started to put in a bathroom and there was like sort of some plumbing that had been laid down, but not like connected to anything.
Yeah, it was very functional, but not necessarily appealing. And but apparently she got caught, and so they shut it down. So it was kind of always something that we were batting around, like, oh yeah, that'd be a great idea to have something like that in the back finished up.
Mm-hmm. So you came into the house in 2012. It already had this detached garage with maybe a bathroom, kind of started decking it out, and you're like, yeah, maybe one day we'll do something with that. So when did that pick up traction? When did that get more serious again?
Well, let's see. The pandemic started.
Yeah. That's a good trigger.
And I think, we actually temporarily moved out of our house because we were all 4 of us with our 2 young kids here, 24/7 for like 10 months during the pandemic. And then we went up to Seattle. We're both from Seattle originally, so we were living out of my parents' house for a while, for like 6 months, and we rented out our house here. And I think we just kind of thought, oh, it'd just be nice to have more space, like another bedroom. So I think after we got back was when we sort of started really looking into it. So that was like 2021?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So after we got back from Seattle and we kind of moved back into our house, we were thinking, yeah, maybe we can start to do this.
Another thing too that when we were thinking about it before we really moved on it is when we did have the kids, my mom is retired, so she was able to come down for extended stay to help out with with childcare. And we realized, how nice it might be if we did have our sort of individual spaces where she could have gone off to the ADU at times, because we're all around each other, and then with young kids and trying to figure all of that out. At the same time, it gets busy. And so it was definitely something we're thinking about at that point as well. And I think another contributing factor too is just that we started to anticipate interest rate movement, and we were like, well, we better pull out the equity to have the cash on hand to do this, just so at least that we have it now. And that was actually sort of one step closer to kind of getting traction, or the impetus to reach out to Realm, start getting contractors interviewed, and those kinds of things.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. You got pandemic. You're doing the multi-generational thing. Yeah. Then when you get back to the house, you're like, oh, there's another way this could work for us.
Yeah.
And unprecedented refi opportunity.
Right.
So perfect storm. And what were the first steps in like doing the research? How did you start?
I think we had to find an architect, right? And then I think Realm, I think they probably knew I was, or my phone, their social media knew something
Yeah.
because things start to pop up in your Instagram. so
Mhm.
so I think Realm, I think popped up in there, and I was like, oh well, this sounds like a nice, service to help you kind of like guide you through this process because even though I knew, like I had Googled things and sort of tried to research stuff on my own, I'd asked, I'd even asked around like other people I knew that had some work done, like for their kind of referrals for architects and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I still felt like, oh, even after we find an architect, like I just feel like I would be so lost in this process because I know it can be kind of difficult, managing everything with the city. Plus, our particular neighborhood is in what's called a historic preservation overlay
Ooh.
zone. So that also carries additional challenges with it. So we really wanted to be able to find someone who also knew how to navigate that. So that was, Realm helped. I think they set us up with like 3 interviews or something like that with 3 different architects, and then one of them I thought was just, I mean, I could just tell like from the first time talking to him, I was like, oh, he really knows what he's doing. He's got a lot of experience, like understands, just all the issues that we have to deal with. So yeah, I think it was kind of just like really helpful, and then kind of same thing happened with the contractors too, where we felt like, oh, one person, one out of the 3 definitely really seemed to match what we needed. Yeah.
Cool. So just to take a step back, you said you tried talking to a few people here and there, just kind of ask
Yeah.
around for referrals. Could you kind of describe what that process was like?
Yeah, well, I think like I know I'd asked, we sort of have neighbors, and they'd had some work done, and so I did get the information for their architect, but their architect was actually a friend of theirs that
Mhm.
lived like in like I think actually lived on the East Coast. Like I don't even think he lived out here. Um, and and she ended up having to go to like our HPOZ, like our local HPOZ, because you have to present everything through there first. And so I was kind of like, oh, do I want to like go through that? Do I want to like do it on my own? And like working with an architect that's like,
Remote.
across the country. And I was kind of like, I think I'd prefer to have somebody local, so that was one, that I was kind of like, kind of cross that one off my list. And then, and some of the architects that we'd spoken to, I mean, they'd done like fine work, but I don't think they'd really worked in our type of neighborhood in an HPOZ. And that was really important to us because, as I said, it's like you have to navigate additional things and there's additional requirements and so on. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think, someone had done a lot of great work, but it was like in the valley, somewhere where they didn't have those kind of restrictions. I kind of felt like, well, that's, yeah, you know.
Okay, and this is our HPOZ kind of like site manager here. This is who's
Yeah,
doing
yes, this is Fuzzy, who
Fuzzy.
now has much easier access to escape the yard right now.
Love it, love it.
Trying to keep a good eye on her.
Accessory dog unit back there. No.
Yeah. Well, we
So,
actually have another dog, but yeah, he's hanging out. He's got a very active social life, so he's hanging out at a neighbor's house right now.
so HPOZ is a historic protected overlay zone, right? It's like one of these.
Yes.
And what's that mean? What did you discover that meant?
Well, it's funny because originally we didn't think that would have a lot of influence on an ADU because we were always told, oh, if it's something that you can't see from the street, that's set back from the street, they don't really. It's just like they'll just like I was told like they would just like approve it.
Mhm.
That was not the case, and in fact, so even though you can't really see it from the street, we still have to keep the part that's like would be sort of visible. Like we still have to make it look exactly the same.
Yeah, it's bizarre because like even by their bylaws, like if you're more than 75 feet back, then the HPOZ shouldn't actually have say over what your unit looks like. But then they have this quirky rule in there that if you're doing a remodel or whatever and you have to do something like more than 40% of the roof is redone, whether you're going up or just staying flat, if 40% of the roof changes, then they have oversight on your project, which is sort of like a loophole. And we get what they were doing is they don't want a bunch of people building 2-story level houses and looking into people's backyards, and they're trying to
They
make
also,
that more difficult.
yeah, and they also want you to like salvage as much material as possible. But you know,
Yeah.
like our existing garage structure, like that wood was super old. I
Yeah,
mean, it
it's
was
100 years
originally
old.
from, yeah, 1916, 1919, or so there wasn't a lot of it that we could salvage, but that's like a big part of it. Like even if you're like if we were going to do things to our house, it's like you have to have, yeah, you have to like have the same kind of windows, like just a lot of things that aren't really efficient, you know. But
Yeah.
Nor are they very historic, right? Like the
yeah,
Right.
exactly. And
enclosed
yeah, and it's
garage.
kind of like if you had just had your work done on your house before this, you know, HPOZ had been instituted, then, you know, it's like you're fine. So it's just kind of it's been, on one hand, it's like we support, we understand like how this came about. It was, neighborhoods didn't like these sort of McMansions popping up, and we have one on our street that's like a total eyesore.
Yeah, like
But
intentionally an
yeah,
eyesore.
and so, so I think we all supported this, but then we also didn't know how much like power they kind of have, like because like we have next door neighbors, and he wanted to put a fence around his front yard, and like, and things like that you should be able to do, I think, but
You
he
have to
was
go through.
able to do it, but he still had to go through the whole process.
Yeah, he had to
and,
pay like for a landscape architect to create the plans, present it to the board, and the board had to review it. And then the other thing you have to like build into your planning for an ADU is if you submit like the plans to the board and the board has questions, like it might be like they only meet like every 3 weeks. So
Yeah,
you
or
might
once a
not,
month, yeah.
or once a month. So you might
Oh, yeah.
get feedback from them and have to provide more information and then have to wait another month. And it might be something as innocuous as what is the item number for the color of red brick paint that you're using
Yeah,
on your
or
thing.
like what material are you going to
Yeah,
use for this window or something? Yeah.
exactly. And it's something that you could provide that should just be reviewed like within the next day. Like, oh, okay, so that's the item number, but they don't meet for another month for them to look at it and go, oh, it's a red brick paint that you're using, and
You're good.
we can approve that. And now you've
Yeah.
just pushed your timeline to the right another month
Yeah.
for something totally innocuous and irrelevant in most cases. If you were doing neon green, that would be
For sure.
different, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay, that's fascinating. So HPOZ, surprising amount of details and rules. They're not always intuitive. You
Yes.
just had a friend go through it, so you know that if you have an out of towner doing your designs, that you'd be involved constantly. And so instead, you're like, let's try to find somebody who specializes, who really knows, and who can handle this.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so you went to Realm, and they helped you
Yeah.
find 3 different designers and architects.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about that process? Like you mentioned an interview process.
Yeah, so I think, we first talked to Ram, just saying what we're doing, obviously, all of these issues that we kind of already know going into it. And, then they set up, I think, 3 different interviews. And, and like I said, I'm sure they were all competent people, but like, one of them, I just felt like they had a lot of more experience, like doing things, farther out, like out in the valley or in other places where I know they didn't have to deal with the same kind of zoning stuff that we did. And then when we ended up speaking to the architect that we ended up hiring, like I just like immediately like just talking to him on the phone, like without even coming here, like he was like, oh, like he was already talking about all these things you got to think about, and like and I could just tell he had a lot of experience. And so I told Tony, I was like, even before he came out here, I was like, I think I like this guy a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Perfect.
yeah.
we didn't spend a lot of time on architects once we found that guy. It
Yeah.
was, our guy was really, he's been great like the whole time, really engaged, worked with our contractor well too. We did learn during this process that there can be some conflicts between contractors and architects. And yeah, he was able to, provide our contractor with information about stuff, and where they did have one conflict because one thing came up because of the slope of the backyard where we had to put in a retaining wall as opposed to a curb,
Yeah.
just for protection's sake from like water intrusion into the new build in the future at some point. They worked together very nicely about like what they thought the solution was. Plus, our architect had an engineer in house, so then you didn't have the additional cost of having to go back to find an engineer to do the observation. Everything was done in house, and so that part was really convenient. And I think ultimately probably saved us a lot of money where our architect was a one-stop shop
Yeah.
because not only did they have the engineering in-house for all of that, they did the plans in-house, they were flexible when we wanted to make changes, but when we finally settled, they filed all the permits with the city, and this was all
Yeah.
part of their fee. So when the contractor that we selected finally came and was like, okay, I just need the plans, I'm going to go pull permits, and I was like, I don't think you need to do that.
Yeah.
And so he pulled up in the plans. He was like, "Oh yeah, I guess we can just get started." And that was really nice.
Love it. Shovel ready. So, so that's amazing. And to go through that process and like interview with different designers, did you hire Realm to do that? Could you explain like what that process is like?
I mean, when we hired, Realm, it was kind of, I think they really are just, they identify people, but I don't think you don't have to choose who they like put on the table for you. Like you could, if like, because some people maybe do already have an architect or do already, or know someone and they've already got a contract. So you could just have your own people. And I think, then Realm's role is more just helping you through the process, kind of like the sort of project management and sort of just like understanding the next steps.
So like literally when you called them, you were like, yeah, I don't have a designer or architect yet.
Right.
And
Yeah.
what did they say? It's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, we got a
And they're like,
package.
yeah, well, we can definitely help you. Yeah. To like, and then I was like, and people that have worked with this situation, because I was like, because again, we have like a really old house, and when we were also like, getting some plans in case we wanted to do a little bit of remodeling for our house too. So there were, was also the ADU, which we ended up really just focusing on the ADU, and but we do have some plans for the house if we eventually get to it.
Never hurts the master plan. Never hurts to have it
Yeah,
all.
it's just it's not really as major work. It's more like kitchen and bathroom remodel type of
Updating,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, because we have
Yeah.
like just sort of a classic craftsman house with a very small kitchen, and yeah, so just some things like that. But yeah, we I guess we trusted them enough. Obviously if we didn't like anyone, we would have said, hey, this isn't working out or something.
So like the way it works, I think and they changed it a bit over time too. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like that you book one of their packages, like get it done or whatever. You put down some money, maybe a few $100,
Yeah.
and then if you need designers, they line up a few designers for you to talk to. If you need builders, they line up a few builders.
Yeah.
And if you use one of them, they credit the money toward the person you use. Is that the spiel?
Yeah.
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 And so you guys started off designer, please help, and actually that clicked right away. How was the builder search? How was getting the GCs through?
Well, it was a long time actually between when we first,
The architect, yeah. So once we had the plans, finalized, that we finally settled on the design, that's when we really started interviewing the contractors. And like Jess said earlier, we kind of ran into like sort of three different types of people. One person was like that we really liked, straight to the point, like this is what we want to do, this is what we kind of want to pay for on our own, this is what we want you to do. And they said that's great, and they created a budget, and they didn't try and upsell or do anything. And what was nice though when we interviewed the three different contractors is they each had something different that they kind of pointed out. So it was like a learning process just to go through the interview that they all keyed on. Like one person keyed on the roof, the other person keyed on like the dig for the sewage and gas line from the backyard to the street. Another person, keyed on something else. And so each time I was like, oh, okay, cool. Now I'm feeling a little more educated about the process. And then the three sort of main people that we interviewed, the second one, they were great, but like Jess said, they were people who probably had worked in the Valley where there were fewer restrictions around the HPOZ. So they were able to kind of just get in there, do the work, and get out without too much hassle, getting the inspectors to come and take a look at it. And then there was one group that we interviewed, and the guy brought like his art designer. And before I explained what we're doing, like this is very basic. It's basically a box. It's a rectangle. It's nothing fancy. We want to make it just a dwelling unit for like rental purposes or visiting friends and family. It's very simple. Like I'm not trying to, shoot for the moon with a fancy, marble inlaid, golden flecked wallpaper or whatever, like none of that stuff. And I don't think that contractor was really listening to me because first off, they started telling me about how much work they do in Beverly Hills.
Yeah, well, it was kind of like a luxury high end.
And
like I can custom build all these things.
Yeah, and then I was like, great. And then he started talking to me about custom cabinets, and I was like, okay, again, it's a box, so it should be pretty easy to square up some prefab cabinets. And then they started showing me all of these art designs of projects they had done that weren't buildings of houses. They were for like events that they had done for other corporations. Now, I won't go into the details of them, but they were just large things that were temporary structures that they had built and designed. And then he had brought his art designer along with us. And I was like, I'm not here. We're not really going to do a lot of art design. Like it's very straightforward what we're asking for. And so those people, like I knew right away, I was like, okay. And then that gave me a relative comparison for the competence of the other people that we had interviewed as far as contractors went. So it was helpful.
Cool. Do you happen to remember, did they all bid on the project?
Yeah, so we did get 3 bids, right?
Yeah.
Because I think Realm actually
and the high?
sent us like a spreadsheet too with like kind of the 3 different bids and like sort of the breakdown of, because sometimes the bids cover different things too.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
so
Apple to apple.
so they kind of gave us a nice like sort of bid analysis. But actually, I'm trying to remember. Like, did we? I can't remember. Like, did we go with the?
Yeah, we ended up going with the lowest, but not because like that was
the
our
lowest,
driving factor. It was because it was the person who was the most straightforward with us about what it is. And they listened when we said what we were going to pay for and what he was going to pay for. And so he put all of that in there and then said, hey, if you do want me to build into the budget these other things, then that's that. Otherwise, I'm going to expect you to take care of, for instance,
like
the flooring, the door, the
toilet, and things like that.
Some sort of the ancillary things.
Purchase those.
Yes. Yeah. And so that was why that bid was the lowest. And then there was sort of a middle bid and then a high bid, which were a lot closer to each other. Well, Andy went through it with us too.
Yeah.
Where he basically kind of broke down the 3 different contractors and sort of what they were paying for and what they weren't paying for. So to your point about the apples to apples, it sort of kind of helped normalize the differences between those bids.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. And how did it go? Did you stick to the budget or close to it? Were there any bad surprises through the construction process?
I mean, there were a couple things. I mean, I think there's always surprises. So there were like you had sort of mentioned already about the retaining wall versus the curb. So that ended up costing more. Although, I mean, our contractor was really gracious about that and kind of gave it some credit or something. And
he basically laid out. He's like, look, we tried to get around this. This wasn't built into the project, so I'll basically cut this portion out of my profit. And then you guys cover that portion. And, it's a really straightforward transaction. And not uncomfortable to have those conversations also.
Yeah, I
And
mean, we've worked really well with him.
yeah,
So
and we're pretty laid back. I mean, I feel like our contractor is still very cautious because I'm sure there's people out there that are like, they think that, hey, I put this on paper, then I should get 100% of exactly what I paid for. I shouldn't have to pay for anything else, even if the situation's different than what I put on paper. And there's like sort of a lack of maybe understanding around that. So our contractor is very cautious when he's presenting these additional costs to us, and we just have the conversation, and we get it. Like,
yeah.
nothing goes according to plan, right?
Yeah.
100%. So,
There's
But I
always
think
something.
Yeah, but I mean, otherwise, like in terms of like I feel like everything else has been pretty
pretty close. Yeah, pretty spot on.
and time wise too. Like it's actually
Way
gone
faster.
really quickly. Like I was
Yeah.
surprised. I guess I thought maybe there would be more like delays because even just waiting on the city for like inspections or something. I just for some reason I thought things would be more drawn out, but it's actually really gone at a pretty fast pace.
That's awesome. So when you got your permit, what till the completion of the project, what did that look like?
I mean, they started basically
24
yeah,
January.
the January 24th, and so it's been, and it seems like they might be done basically before the end of this month, right?
Wow.
Nick?
Well, close
Close?
to it, yeah. So I mean, we're looking at like basically being 90% done within 3 months.
Yeah.
And really, it's just some of the finishing up on stuff
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna take a little bit longer. But it really moved. I mean,
And
I
that's
think
with like all these storms happening.
yeah, in the
too.
middle of yeah,
So
the atmospheric rivers. And yeah, I mean, the original sort of projection was like, 6 to 9 months, and we're going to be basically 95%
probably done,
done.
definitely done within 4 months.
In 3 months, and then
So.
maybe done within 4.
Yeah.
Cool. That's so cool. And so that means right now you've got a unit back there. It's the walls are closed up, painted. They're doing finishes, like cabinets are all in.
Not quite
they haven't
that
done all
far.
the interior stuff, but like the exterior, like the whole, the structure's all there.
Yeah.
The roof is there. They've like done at least one.
The drywall's
layer
the
on
drywall's done.
Yeah.
They've sanded it, so the
think they started
drywall's
putting
ready
that
for
down.
they're gonna put flooring in this week and paint the walls.
Nice.
And then cabinets are coming in, and so
Yeah, and they've started the shower, or they're gonna start the
and then the tiling for the shower.
some things. So
Fast.
yeah, it's moving pretty fast. It's kind of like
Very
crazy.
cool.
I didn't expect it to go so fast. Yeah.
That's it. When it goes right. Okay. Can we talk a little bit? So, what neighborhood are you in? What's the keep calling it
We are.
Sunset
It's
Square.
called Sunset Square, which is sort of in between, we're in between, Sunset and Hollywood, and in between like Fairfax and La Brea. So kind of this area, kind of close to just south of Runyon Canyon, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, the very foot of the hills. You go across the street, you're in the hills,
Right.
and we're like the first street across the street from the hills.
That's a good way for people who aren't from LA to think about it. It's kind of a nice older neighborhood. Lots of single family. Some clusters. Some like little bungalows and stuff too in that neighborhood. Or
Yeah.
There's some, but I mean, that's part of like they were, the HPOZ was like, oh, let's stop, like we can't let them build bigger
Mm-hmm.
developments. I think they really were trying to stop that from happening. So.
Yeah, and how big did you go with the ADU? Did you stick to the garage footprint?
No,
We had to go bigger.
We went bigger, so it's 440 square feet, I think. And it actually we did give up basically most of our backyard to expand but I mean, honestly, with water restrictions and everything, it's kind of like, well, maybe it doesn't make sense to have so much grass like to water. So but we definitely, so we expanded out from the original footprint just so that we could still have a little bit of storage space, a little, and then also have like a separate unit.
That's it. But when you replace your hoarding spot, you do need to put it all up there still. Can I ask about cost? You're 90% done. Do you know roughly what it'll have cost all in?
All in, I'd say like with probably 200, I don't know, maybe about 220,000.
Very cool. And that's construction permits, architecture, everything.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And you guys are almost there. You can imagine. You don't have to imagine what it feels like anymore. You can see the walls and stuff. How does it feel? How do you think it's going?
I mean, it's still like, kind of surprising to like see the whole big thing in your backyard.
Yeah.
It's just like, wow, but
Cool.
yeah, I mean, so then we've been talking about, oh, well, we could also lease it for some income, but I do kind of want to take a little bit of time just to enjoy it first, and maybe have like some people visit, and
And so that's kind of, it's flexible. You're going to use it for yourselves for a while, maybe lease it eventually. Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe you can reset your office back out there.
Well, I don't know. Yeah. Temporarily, yeah.
He used to, because actually also the pandemic, we both ended up working from home all the time now. So before, we both used to go to an office, or at least for me, like 2 or 3 days out of the week, and then now we both work from home all the time. So we had to like kind of create office spaces too. And he used to work out in our garage. So then, and then for a while you were working out on the front porch. And now he's in the house, but it's kind of like not a real office space that he has in the house. So
I converted the piano to a desk.
a piano bench press and a desk.
Yeah.
A grand desk. I like it. Okay, and then I guess if you hadn't met Realm and they hadn't sorted you out with the designer you clicked with and the builder, what do you think you would have done? How would you have done this project?
I mean, probably would have just tried to, I probably would have like been asking for more referrals and, in interviewing people on our own. I don't know. I mean, I guess I would have tried to just like do it on our own, but it just I definitely felt like it felt better to have someone to ask questions to, and have someone kind of guide us through the process. Because especially even when we had to do like, financing and things like that, just to talk, just have someone to talk to about all that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story with us. I think a lot of homeowners are going to benefit from hearing it, and they'll recognize themselves in you, and some of them will want to do that work that you just described, go around asking for referrals, figuring out their own thing. Others are going to want to take the very easy step, call our sponsor Realm, and get hooked up with the magically perfect designer in GC. Maybe you like the guy who does the golden toilets in Beverly Hills.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Some people have, a very specific point of view, right? Yeah. And like they're like naturally designed people. And so I could understand if that was your perspective, that you would be very particular about that. So,
or maybe even for somebody who like where, a budget wasn't so much the concern, and they really did want somebody to come in and like just kind of tell them their vision, and can you make my vision happen for this space? And then that would have been a great contractor for that type of person.
Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, I'm not knocking anybody. Like they all have their fits, and we just found ours with a different contractor.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Because we did also remember we also saw that another friend of mine. We did speak to someone that she'd worked with, like just doing like projects on like her house and stuff, and he actually seemed really like good. But then like that was before we had all of our plans kind of finalized. So he was like, I can't really give you like a bid because I don't know all these details yet. And
we talked to about 5 different contractors.
Yeah.
Before we settled on that. I think most people talk to 3. We talked to like 5 different people, and I would say there was 2 that were sort of people that we were willing to go with, and then a third was sort of on the fence about, and then the other one who was for a different customer.
Yeah. Well said. Okay, thank you very much. If people want to watch more videos about how Realm works, check out this playlist. If you want to just learn more about ADUs, there's a lot of videos over here. Thank you guys.